Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Rhee and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset.
All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. and Coach Sam Rhee. And today's topic is a little on the heavier side. We are going to address, I would call it state of affiliates, our opinions, our views on what had happened, the tragic death of Lazar Djukic, Games athlete, day one, event one at the 2024 CrossFit Games in Fort Worth, Texas, just a few weeks ago. Before we get into that, I just want to put it out there that there's a huge investigation going on that we don't have any inside access to, and we shouldn't. We don't have most of the facts that surround the situation from a protocol, logistical, and even medical perspective. But we are going to approach this subject from a response from two CrossFit affiliate owners, two CrossFit athletes, two CrossFit Games fans. Sam and I are in those sections, and we do feel like it's important for us to discuss this as owners and parts of the community. And we want to, be very sensitive to the fact that our opinions are way down the list of importance in this entire situation. I wrestled back and forth with even talking about this on this podcast, and then I really went back did some self-reflecting on some of my own thoughts and emotions on this subject, and I also feel that it is important for people from affiliates to have open conversations and listen and bounce their ideas off of each other and listen and discuss and try to really look at this from a lot of different perspectives, because even in the Games camp, the Games group, there were so many different opinions from the athletes, the judges, the CrossFit staff, and obviously the community as a whole, that I think that instead of just barking out what your opinions are and who's at fault, it's better to just listen and reflect. And I want this podcast episode to be mainly coming from that perspective of, hey, let's just throw some things on the wall from different perspectives and see if it can not necessarily change anyone's thoughts. That's not the goal of any podcast that we do. We don't want to change anyone's thoughts, but we do want to open the door to different perspectives that maybe you're not currently looking at. And now that we are a few weeks away from it, there might be, I would even say there definitely is a little less emotion involved, not to downplay the situation at all. But we know that, just looking at some of the reactions from people, from fans and athletes and people in the CrossFit media space, I think a lot of people feel like they have to say something right away just because they have a platform. And I would say if you put them in a dark room and say, let's be honest about this, I think some of them might regret some of those initial reactions, even though they're raw and credible. But Sam, what were your initial thoughts? We were actually recording a podcast when it happened, and our phones started blowing up during that episode, and then it was just a snowball effect from there. What were your initial stances on this and on what happened?
I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's been doing CrossFit for 10 years, who truly believes in the methodology, someone who is a huge CrossFit proponent. And when Lazar Djukic died, that emotional impact was way beyond what I was expecting inside myself, I think, for a lot of people. And I think the circumstances were such that it made it so difficult to process emotionally for everyone, even for someone like me who has no connection as an athlete to the CrossFit Games. I've watched them and admired them, but to see that was so depressing. It was so impactful, and I feel like the community had to take a lot of steps, and there were a lot of people who did a lot of different things in order to react and respond in that way. And you're right, it has evolved over the past 2 weeks in terms of my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, but I was also surprised how many people felt so hurt by this incident and called into question a lot of things, honestly. And that's why I think this podcast is important, because it really makes you self-reflect about a lot of things around CrossFit.
Right.
And whether that's justified or not justified, I think it's appropriate, especially with the magnitude of someone like Lazar Djukic passing away. Like that invites and demands reflection and discussion.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to come at this from like a bird's eye perspective and kind of look at all the surrounding factors to this. What I don't want to do is even start a conversation of were there enough lifeguards? Is this event safe? I know it's going to come up at some point in this conversation, but we don't know facts. There's an investigation going on that I'm sure there will be some facts put out there for the community to reflect on. But, you know, in this world now, we're so quick to want to really pick a side of an argument. Who's at fault? Was it the lifeguard? Was it Dave Castro? Was it Don Fall? Was it the athletes themselves, right? Could this have been prevented? That's what I always call Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to come up with solutions to what should have happened 2, 3, 4 weeks after it actually happened. But, you know, look at any sort of historical change. You know, people died in car accidents after getting drunk, then they had to come up with laws. People were not wearing seatbelts when cars were first made. People started dying. Then we started making rules and laws against it. This is where CrossFit's infancy as a sport is exposed, where they've done run, swim, run. They've done swim every year. They've done it in the ocean with sharks. I've been an athlete at Wadapalooza where we swam in between deadlifts and strict handstand push-ups at 8:45 at night, where you couldn't see more than 50 feet out into the ocean or bay, wherever we were down in Miami. There are a lot of things that you can look at now and say, hey, that probably was not very safe. But again, mistakes need to happen for progress to be made. And unfortunately, in some cases, it does turn into a life and death situation. And that's where I actually empathize. I feel bad for so many different people. That was my initial emotion to this. Friends and family of Lazar were first. You know, his brother was actually a competitor at the CrossFit Games. I can't even imagine what those emotions must have been like. I remember watching Dave Castro's story. He does a very good job at the Games of showing some behind the scenes of athletes in cold tubs. And on his last video, his brother was asking people, where's Lazar? He came in. He was ahead of me. And it was just so kind of raw and innocent in that no one at that time knew that he was underwater and he hadn't come out. And you know these kinds of situations, what Sam put it a good way, it forces you to reflect, and that's what I really want to do here in this episode. So looking back at the safety of events at the CrossFit Games, I've been following this since inception basically, and I have always looked at the swimming events as dangerous, but not life-threatening, beyond, to a point where it's irresponsible. CrossFit has already said, hey, we are going to cancel all swimming events from all CrossFit sanctioned events until further notice. Our coaches we have said that swimming should be part of a fitness test of this level, but maybe it doesn't need to be in open water. If this happened in a pool, he probably does not drown because he's easy to find at that point. Do you think that CrossFit needs to stay away from swimming at this point? Do you think it's something that's, 25 athletes, I think the number is 25 died in triathlons in the water this past year. Is it part of the accepting of the risk? Because that's really what I want to start off is how much risk should an athlete accept? How much risk is held on the shoulders of CrossFit HQ and Dave Castro?
This was one of the biggest topics of conversation after this occurred. So, Lazar Djukic, it was an 800-meter open water swim. They had run 3.5 miles prior to that. And the debate about safety, about open water swim and temperature and running beforehand and all of that, it was overwhelming. If I read another vitriolic post by someone saying this was criminal in some way or that this should never have happened in open water or all these things, I'm going to throw up because I don't know. And nobody knows. Right. You're right. 25 triathlon athletes, but people also pointed out hundreds of thousands of people competed in these.
Percentage is, the percentages don't line up.
So I don't like debating whether open water swim is safe or not safe. Should CrossFit have done it the way they did? I don't know. I'm not an expert. I don't care. We saw a number of quote experts. I mean, people that I really respect, like Henshaw,
Chris Henshaw,
others who have opined on this, and I respect and I listen to what they have to say. Ultimately speaking, I'm going to wait on that question and see what happens, because I agree with a majority of people. I was just talking to Adam Ramsden. Swimming is an important part of fitness in terms of demonstrating your ability to be fit. And I agree with that. I think it's a unique modality that's different than a lot of other exercises. And I think as a society, if we emphasize that swimming is important, just like we emphasize running or, lifting heavy weights, like that is important. The way you do it, how you do it, I'm not gonna debate that. I do know, though, a lot of people like you, others who have competed in open water swims have found it really scary.
Absolutely.
Very challenging.
Yeah.
And so those types of issues have to be discussed.
I mean, I'm not an elite athlete. I have not competed in water that often. I've competed in pools, definitely feel much better in there, but it's still scary. Mike McKinney, we were talking about our back and forth in Arizona this year. There's lifeguards, you're in a pool, you're never swimming that far away from people. If you do go under, you're very easy to find. There's still panic when you get to a point where you really cannot control your breathing anymore and your muscles are starting to shut down. And one of my most vivid memories of 2016 Wadapalooza was breaststroking because I could no longer freestyle, and I started breathing in a way that I don't normally hear myself breathe. And I'm literally thinking, I don't think anyone sees me right now. I'm not going to come down on Wadapalooza. I don't know. Maybe they did have eyes on me. I was by myself. I was the first one in the water. Not a humble brag, by the way. That was the plan of the workout. That was Dave go unbroken on the deadlift. So because I didn't want to swim around people. My biggest fear of that event was jumping in with 8 other people at the same time, one of them landing on me, kicking me, and they were just, no one would know I was underwater. So that was my plan. Backfired a little bit in that I couldn't breathe when I was actually swimming. And it was a very scary, there was probably a little bit of a death type fear in that. When I was a boat driver / lifeguard in New Hampshire for my summer job during high school, college, every week there was a mini sprint triathlon, and it started off with water, then it was a bike, then it was a swim, and it was tiny. I mean, you'd have groups of 5 or 15. It was never more than that. And we had probably 6 or 7 lifeguards, and I drove the boat along the deep section in case someone needed to hold on to something. And I remember being so fearful because you can't watch everyone. And that guy's in front. He looks like the best swimmer, but he also looks the most fatigued. But there's 6 people back there, and you are almost forced into a decision of who to pursue and who not to. And you're trying to keep eyes. And the entire time, every week, it was our most anxiety-filled 15 minutes of the week, every week, because you weren't completely sure if you had eyes on everyone. So when I always accept, a lot of times when I reflect on things like this, I remember the Kobe Bryant death when he died in the helicopter crash. It really had a strong impact on me for whatever reason. I try to take experiences and tie them to what I go through, right? To see if I can understand it on a deeper level. So I did that as an athlete, what I just talked about, being in water and being very fearful. I even say on a lesser scale, not life and death, the row burpee box jump workout that we just did last week, there's a point where a lot of us CrossFit athletes kind of do this, right? You are over fatigued. You went way too hard. And we call it dark. We almost compliment it in some ways. And it's admirable, but it's not smart. There's a difference where I pushed through that. I went for it. I was chasing a number. I was trying to beat Alex. I was trying to get this. I was trying to get my splits, right? To the point I could no longer control my breathing. I still had 40 seconds left to work. I started feeling weird goosebumps on my arm and my neck. That is where I label this almost like an athlete responsibility in some ways. And that's where this can get really sensitive in that this guy was a water polo player. Probably one of the most comfortable athletes at the CrossFit Games ever in the water. Those guys tread water for hours and get pummeled and they're tired.
Absolutely.
Did he, because he knew he could do well in that event, can you go down the path of saying, we can't only place blame on one side. It's usually never one side. It's not the programming, the workout, the lifeguard. Can you put some of this responsibility on athletes and the culture of this sport? We've been talking about this, you and I, Sam. We had a good little talk the other night about, like, some athletes can't control themselves, even on a workout level here at a 7 a.m. class on a Wednesday.
It scares me as a coach.
Yeah. Like, they have bad knees, they're doing max squat cleans and pistols and running. They have bad shoulders, they're kipping and butterflying 34 unbroken reps so that they can have their best score of the day.
You know who you are.
That is a very similar level of discussion that I'm trying to understand this from a bird's eye perspective of that athlete. Did he overextend himself? Do games athletes do that? And then when something bad happens, it's CrossFit's fault. The heat strokes from Murph back in 2014, 15.
That was brought up afterwards.
People are trying to win the title of fittest athlete in the world. There's red flags, but they push through it for the pursuit. Are you accepting risk, potentially death, of pursuing this kind of competition at the elite level?
I think there are 3 topics which I think you're going to address later. But I think when you raise that question, the first is if you put athletes through risk, there's always some risk involved, even in a class. Is the safety protocols that you have in place acceptable? So, for example, if there is something that is concerning, even in a class, do you make sure that you have some guardrails up or monitoring or whatever so that, you see someone doing squat cleans and they're starting to really not look good? You're like, whoa, stop.
Yes.
Like, so you're actually kind of stopping them before they get to that point. And so the question would be, safety protocols, which again have been discussed ad nauseum for this, were there enough safety protocols for the athletes pushing?
We don't have those facts. You and I don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
And there is an investigation, and people are even like conflicting about the investigation and who's involved and everything, whatever. Right. The second part of that is, what kind of risk do you need to put these athletes under in order to determine the fittest on earth? And that's where I'm sure we'll talk about the PFAA and what they're talking about. So, yes, athletes are accepting risk, but what is CrossFit Games' responsibility in terms of, reaching for a goal and then protecting the athletes to a certain degree? Not always. Like, listen, remember Brooke Wells snatching 180, dislocated, tore all those elbow ligaments. I don't know. You can't really put that on CrossFit in that situation per se.
Right.
Or can you? I don't know. Like, I don't know how many events were leading up to that.
Right.
Was a 1 rep max in front of everyone the right way of testing it? You as a programmer know how to challenge the athletes, find the fittest, but also mitigate risk to a certain point. You do that every day as a programmer. You're like, this would be a great workout. This would be fun. I would like to see this, but I feel like there's a lot of risk involved. And so
that's part of the reason why I do truly empathize for Dave Castro. I really do.
It's not easy. And I as a non-programmer can't sit there and criticize, how dare you do the run in front of this one? How dare you make this do this? How dare you put these athletes into these situations? I don't know. Right. But there are people, you probably have a better perspective than most.
But I will say, I don't know either. I don't have an equation.
But you have more experience.
I have a better gauge because of experience, but I don't have the answer. We talked about this the other night. Pull-ups and hang snatches in one workout. How many is too many? 63, 70? I mean, people did 10 rounds of that workout, 90 pull-ups.
Right.
Is that too many for a workout? And then I'm like, well, we do Cindy, we do Murph, so no, we can't be too many because then we never train it, then we have them do it during Murph. Like, I think the critical thinking component is what's most important. And I do think these guys critically think about programming as much as any humans on the earth, the ones that run the games.
I will say yes, but then I will say in my limited experience with Bosman, with Castro, they are very uncompromising. Like, they will go balls to the wall. Like I told you, when I went to that CrossFit Medical Summit, it was like packed in there. all these.
I remember you telling me.
And
that.
I said, and Boz is like, let's do 135-pound snatches.
Yep.
And I'm like, what?
The quarterfinals, the quarterfinals test.
Yeah, the quarterfinal. And I was like, wait a second. These are a bunch of like, they're not really like awesome CrossFit. And we're all sitting there trying to do 135 snatches in like this tiny little area. And part of me says, that's what CrossFit HQ's mentality is a little bit is, listen, there are no training wheels. You have to go for it.
Yeah.
Or you're not going to get better. And two, it's like, okay, but how much risk is like, oh my God, that guy just dropped a 135-pound barbell on his head or on somebody else's head.
Yep.
And so...
And until it happens, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe we should switch it. And this is where games athletes are saying, how about you try to prevent things from happening rather than just respond when something goes wrong?
And so I don't have any experience, but the little glimpses I see, I can see where some people's perspective and criticisms might come into play.
So I'm going to tie this to the affiliate of an issue that to quote what we've talked about last couple of weeks with Tim, keeps me up at night. Tried to take this event and tie it to. I actually talked to one of the guys that runs another CrossFit event, sanctioned event, big deal, big role. And he says, if this does not make everyone reflect on their own safety protocols, whether it's at their competition or at their own gyms, you're doing it wrong. And I immediately thought after my emotion I kind of took in what actually happened to Lazar, is running here at CrossFit Bison. At our new affiliate, that's been here for 5 years. I should say newer, right? We moved at our old affiliate. We had a great running situation on a road. Almost no one ever drove by it, never had traffic issues. Where we are now is very different. And every time we do running workouts, there's a fear in my head that we are running into a street there's a couple blind spots. You have a bunch of people that drive like idiots on this road because they're trying to speed up to get to the highway. And we also have very tired athletes that are not the smartest when they're tired, and they'll take big wide turns. And I've had fears of people getting hit by a car running. And whether it's me, whether it's my brother, who Aaron has been the closest I've ever seen. I think a car missed him by less than 2 inches, and I mean that, not exaggerating. The other day we had someone got into a fight with a guy that was driving and didn't look both ways, and they were kind of just doing the whole like arm raise up to each other. We have kids that run here that my biggest fear every time we run, there's times I can't even watch, and I mean that, where these people, they'll run to the street. I'm like, I have this image in my head of a car just flying down the road and hitting person and killing them. I do. That is one of my fears.
Yay, no more running at CrossFit Bison.
So does this change? And we have made a lot of changes to how we structure workouts, meaning, Sam's a big part of this. On Thursday mornings, you have a workout that starts off with a run. He doesn't like staggering starts, but he will. If it's 6 or 7 a.m., there's 30 people that want to run. I mean, thank God we have half our gym that won't run anymore. They all want the C2 bike.
You better get here early if you want that.
Or they take the time cap on the Rogue bike so they don't have to try hard. But that's a topic for another day, Sam.
I will say this. I think the running is safe enough.
Yeah.
I mean...
You know what, though? Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
The CrossFit staff, Dave Castro, Adrian Bosman, would have said the swimming is safe enough at the games.
Yes. So that gives me pause and gives you pause, obviously. I would say the first thing is should you cut out running altogether? And the answer is no.
Right.
Like, even though I suck at running and I
Same.
always hurt myself running if I run a lot, like, I still need to run. And as soon as my heel gets a little bit better, I'm going to be back to running because I have to run whatever I can. I think it's on us to remind our athletes that when you are running, that you have to be aware, and it's not just about, you don't own the road. You don't run in the middle. Like, right. I've seen some people literally run in the middle of the road,
especially on the turnaround.
Yeah. Right? So you have to be aware. I think the traffic is safe.
So you're talking about athlete responsibility.
Yes. And I think we're constantly looking at ways to improve it.
Still are.
And I think, so I think it's an ongoing issue. But if I honestly felt like it was unsafe for me to run or my athletes, I wouldn't do it. But I worry about the same thing in terms of like, oh my gosh, they ran yesterday, now they're doing double unders today.
Yeah.
How many people's ankles and feet are going to be sore? I worry about that too.
Absolutely.
There's a million things you can worry about.
And you should. Honestly, if you take on any sort of affiliate ownership, even as a coach, you should be afraid. That's why that's part of what we said. You should be nervous when you coach, because there's so many things you got to keep track of, and the athlete safety is probably the number one priority. You know, community, fitness, health, progress, scaling. Athlete safety is first.
Right.
But
again, there is athlete responsibility. Yeah. So I'm like, I let them know. We just ran a lot yesterday. We're doing a lot of double unders today. See how you feel. Judge accordingly in terms of your performance. And if somebody like goes ham and does 300 double unders after running 2 miles and their feet are killing them, well, I let you know. And that was, you're not 5.
Right.
So you should have figured that out. Especially when I gave it to you on the whiteboard talk, which I'm sure you showed up early enough to listen to and hear when I talked to you about it.
Yep.
So there's a balance that we have to.
Yeah, there's always a balance, and this is where you want to tie this back to the games and the games athletes. You know, like I don't know if they're required to give physicals or medical reports to the CrossFit HQ before the competition starts. There's a rumor out there that Lazar has had a heart episode before in Dubai, an event where they ran up a bunch of stairs. Again, that's speculation. I don't think we should go too deep into that, but there's a lot of kind of dual responsibility here, and I don't like how a situation like this immediately turns into finger pointing. And I think the number one thing to do is everyone should reflect on their own process, athletes included, by the way. You know, Dave Castro interviewed every single games athlete for his YouTube channel prior to the games. Did any one of them bring up safety to them to the regard that someone might die? No. But afterwards, they want to put him on the cross, and they want to sacrifice him and say like, hey, we finally found the guilty culprit. Where, you know, you hate to say, like, athletes, you know, accidents happen, and how you respond to something like this is very different than a Navy SEAL. Just listen to Angelo from Mayhem, who's a firefighter. He goes, about once a week I see a dead body. And he goes, that doesn't mean I don't have an insensitivity to it, but there are a lot of people there that you could tell, and even some of the conversations, they've never had a tragedy like this. They've never personally dealt with something like this, thank God. But someone in the military, someone that's works for fire and police, you know, even the firefighters here and police officers here, like, they see a lot of shit that I'm never going to see. And in some ways, I'm kind of like in sheltered in that regard. I haven't been through a lot of personal tragedy in my lifetime. I've known a couple people that have died in accidents, and, you know, went through 9/11 from an outside perspective. Did not lose anyone personally. You know, we have some friends that have, so you can't even compare that. But it's a situation where I think that if you can sit back and say Dave Castro was the person that had to make the decision on whether or not the games had to move on, nobody else had to do that. And I think that was probably, other than losing a friend or family member, the hardest part of that weekend. Is you have to be the one to make a decision. A decision had to be made, and most people did not have to make it.
I think if I was Dave Castro and I had to face Lazar Djukic's family after that, I don't know if I could. Like, I don't think I'm strong enough. I think I would quit. I would leave the sport. I would leave the games. If I felt if any way responsible, and you can't help but not. These were your, you know? Yeah. So it's devastating to feel that you've contributed to somebody's death in some way. And you're right. I have seen dead people in my career, especially in training, but nothing has fortunately impacted me in such a personal way.
Right.
But I can't imagine how he feels or how I would feel in that situation if I was also Don Fall and I was responsible ultimately for the safety of the people participating. So, but on the other hand, I don't think you're probably just, I would be dodging my responsibility if I did that, right? So you have a responsibility to his family, to, you know, the sorrow that they feel, you know, the depth of your own, you know, sadness for whatever role you may feel like you've played in that. but I know they also feel like they have a responsibility to make things better, to build on it, to not make this something about themselves and their own personal responsibility, but also to make CrossFit better. So it's a really weird situation, and I don't know if I could process it well if I was in any one of their shoes, as you said.
Yeah. So just to wrap up this part of it, in regard to where do we think Dave Castro's future and the CrossFit Games future is going to reside? Because now the PFAA, or is it PFFA? PFAA, which is an organization run by elite athletes and coaches and other people involved in the elite level of the sport, have made a few demands. The big one was removing Dave Castro from the sport team. And Dave Castro is essentially the founding father of the CrossFit Games, and he's been kicked out, he's been brought back. From my outsider perspective, he's probably the most important person in the sport. From a non-competitive, from a non-athlete perspective, he's run it, he's grown it, it's his baby. Rich Froning is quoted saying that he was an absolute prick back in the day, and he has changed his ways, but there is probably still some really tough leadership that rubs some athletes, especially ones that have a little bit more sensitivity to them, the wrong way, and they want to see this sport become a little bit more formalized, in some ways safer, in some ways a little bit more predictable. Because I will say this about the games, Sam, I love the games. I don't think they need as many events as they do to find the real result. I think in some ways it has become a Hunger Games. Can you make it? Can you even make it to the end? Does it need to be that? And I find myself, again, reflect on my own, there are times I get caught up into that as a programmer for a gym. I want to push the envelope because people can. Does that mean it's smart, though? Just because you can does not mean you should. And I do catch myself, and you catch me sometimes. You'll call me out sometimes on some workouts where it's like, hey, 12 minutes would have been fine the other day, not 17, right? Like, it probably would have been an equally effective workout. Or, hey, these loads, it could have been 20% lighter. It still would have gotten the same result for the gym. Dave Castro, if they cut the events down to 6 per weekend, and, that's almost cutting them in half, maybe in some cases into a third, could they still find the actual result? And the answer is probably yes. So could you see that being the future of the sport, where it's a lot less volume and it's less extreme?
I think there are two sides to it. The first is every year Dave Castro has programmed, or whomever has programmed, harder, tougher, more events, and yet these athletes have risen to the challenge and done insanely well. Like, not just well, but insanely well.
And most of them don't get hurt.
Yes. And
the vast majority.
And the numbers, the accomplishments have increased exponentially every year. And so the argument could be made, if you didn't press the limits, how would you have known that people should be snatching 300 plus every time?
Right.
That they should be doing this after this, after this, after this. So the one side would say, listen, how else are you going to determine who's fittest? We haven't even found the upper limit of potential yet. We're still on that upward curve, so that's where we should be.
And the goal of the games is to find the fittest on earth.
The fittest. And we haven't had like 15 people, like, other than the ring dip, like chest pec issue.
Yep.
Like, no, we're not killing anybody here, except for Lazar Djukic potentially.
Right.
So that's where they've been for 17 years up until now. But the second side is, and this is where the PFAA has said, we don't need to go to that extreme, like you said, Hunger Games, to determine the fittest. We can reel it in. But more importantly, Dave Castro has not been responsive to safety issues. That's what their number one issue is. It's whether Lazar Djukic's death could have been prevented, whether the appropriate safety protocols were in place. It's the fact that Dave Castro, they're saying, has not been responsive. They haven't listened to our concerns, and we're the ones in the thick of it doing these things. So that's why they want, transparency between PFAA and CrossFit. They wanted the independent safety team on an ongoing basis in the future, and that they demand that Dave Castro be removed from the sport team. And so these are not just like athletes I don't respect. It's Brent Fikowski, it's Pat Vellner, Fee Sagafi, Annie Thorisdottir. Annie Thorisdottir. Now, when Annie Thorisdottir, who's been a veteran from the beginning, is saying Dave Castro needs to be removed here, and she's made her living doing this successfully, competing at a high level for 10, 12 years, longer. When someone like her says this, I have to listen. I have to listen.
Don't have to agree, but you have to really respect, not even listen, you have to respect that opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you think when these are the people competing on a year after year basis and the leader? Now, it would be as if a group of athletes came to you and been like, Dave, you got to stop. You're not listening to us.
Right.
We don't like this.
Yep.
And at least athletes here can make the choice of going to another gym.
Right.
Right?
Or scaling workout.
Or scaling or whatever. So
this is the home run for them. This is where not a lot. I mean, where some of these guys especially make their livelihood.
They do.
Off of this stuff.
And they drew a line in the sand. And so if you were CrossFit HQ, how would you feel? How would you respond to this?
Yeah. I mean, if you're above Dave Castro, so if you're Don Full and you're looking at athletes criticizing Castro, and Castro budging on some but not a lot, right? I messaged a Games athlete, one of the guys that Sam just said. I don't want to release anything he said, just out of respect for him. But he said this has been a 10 to 15-year issue. They've been making requests and maybe some complaints for 10 to 15 years, and it seems like he's ignoring most of them. I mean, they have crash pads under the rope climbs now. They have standardized heights on pull-up bars. They did do this event. These athletes were warming up in the dark. It was so early in the morning. They had outdoor events planned at night. They were trying to make some changes, but to them, it wasn't enough. And I think if we had a group of athletes coming here and it's like, Dave, you're squat snatching every Monday morning for 12 weeks straight, and you have all these people getting hurt, but you keep doing it. Can you, this is not right. I'm like, all right, fine. We'll take one of those weeks off. We're still going to do it 11 out of 12 weeks, every Monday morning, 1 rep max squat snatch. That would be, and then if I keep doing that, where I can say, well, I did listen to some of your demands, but no, you don't control the operation. It's my decision at the end of the day. That could be easily viewed from the outside as you are being too stubborn. You're not listening. But on the flip side, you'll have some people say a leader in Castro's position or in our position at this gym that we should know what's best. We're not going to make emotional decisions based on what a few loud people talk about, right? I mean, I've had people talk about programming, both to my face and behind my back.
Absolutely.
And I love having the conversation. I really genuinely do. And I'm not the kind of guy that won't listen, but I will have a response because no one puts more thought into it than I do. Most people, when they have a negative experience, whether it's a workout, it's a movement, where they are in life, they have that situation has so much control over their opinion about programming that it's hard, right? Example, if I have someone that used to come to the gym 5-6 days a week, now they come once or twice, and they're saying the workouts are too hard, the answer is you're just not as fit as you used to be.
Maybe.
It could be. That's what I'll say. And maybe someone else will like, no, he doesn't come anymore because the workouts are too hard, that kind of thing.
Or too dangerous, or they move,
Yep.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that could go down a whole different discussion. But I tie that to Dave Castro, where I do think he has made some changes. And I've heard Games athletes say he has changed. But it might not be enough. And that's where, from a Don Fall perspective, if you really feel like the sport is about to fall apart because your home run hitters, the biggest faces in the sport, might band together and leave, you might need to make Dave Castro the fall guy. But who's going to replace him? And then what spillover? What's the negative impact of getting rid of Dave Castro? And
that's huge. Potentially.
That's where I think the next part of the outline comes into play. Where should affiliates care about what's going on with this beyond the fact that you're a good person and you don't want to see someone lose their life?
Yes and no. I mean, we talked about it with Tim Carroll.
Yep.
What happens on the HQ level really doesn't affect us in any way on a daily level here at our CrossFit affiliate.
Yep. I will say this, though. to interrupt you again. Sorry.
It's okay.
I did have an athlete from our gym that's not into sport at all, but you're surprised how much they know about the sport. So they're into it somewhat, but they don't compete. So they said, like, I've actually started to question whether or not I want to do CrossFit anymore because I don't know if I want to be associated with organizations that do this.
Fair.
And I was like, whoa. Then it was not this is not a drama, emotional person where like they just overreact to everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that really made me think, like, wow, I've never heard someone say that, other than like the COVID situation, George Floyd, Glassman, like that was a whole different situation in my opinion. This is more like CrossFit is killing people, the CrossFit Games. So they say so far, without the investigation being out there. Does that affect how an affiliate should want to kind of tie and bind with CrossFit?
My answer is a provisional yes. So we benefited when CrossFit was big. ESPN, right? Broadcast, the heyday, 2012, 13, 14, you know, when things were big. Like, gyms were growing exponentially, and it wasn't the affiliates, it was the publicity and the PR surrounding CrossFit. And then CrossFit has always, since then, after COVID and Glassman, it has done such a poor job with PR in general. I just feel like they've tried so hard, but they have not found their way. And this is just another hit to the body in terms of what is the message CrossFit is trying to put out there for people. Lately, it's been not forging elite fitness. It's been
We got rid of that.
available for everyone, accessible to everyone.
Do it at home. Do it in
Safe,
your garage.
not dangerous. Like Don Fall said, one of the big things when we talked to him was we have to get the message out that CrossFit isn't scary, it isn't bad, you know, it's for everybody. And
Which is true.
it is true. I do believe it.
Yeah.
But when you see something like this on the New York Times, CrossFit integrity, is it safe, all this sort of stuff, like you said, the casual person, it's just another reason for them to be like, you know what, I don't see Orange Theory having this issue. I'm just going to try that out.
Yeah, so it's funny. I try my best to stay away from comment sections in like debatable topics because some of them aren't even like, some of them are actual robots that are just trying to stem reactions out of people. But also, I think like the keyboard warriors, most of them, not all, are kind of like the people that don't have a backbone. Like they would never say something out loud that they would behind a comment section where they don't know who you are. And they just say some stuff that's really extreme on both sides of any debatable topic. But I did go read a few comments of YouTubers and news articles that were not CrossFit.
Okay.
So these are not CrossFitters that are commenting. And it was like, told you, knew it. This is why I don't do CrossFit. And I'm telling you this right now, whether we agree with it or not, there's a perception out there. I golfed with someone the other day, met him at the golf course. We were in a fundraiser and we golfed, and we told him about the New York Times story that you sent to the coaches. And he goes like, yeah, I've always heard that stuff's really extreme. Now the guy was in his 60s, he was older, but he goes, yeah, that was his first reaction. He goes, I've always heard that it was extreme. I'm like, well, hold on. Like we're literally on the tee box. So I was like, this is like the games. It's not really, it's like telling someone that because they sprained their ankle or because, you know, someone tore their ACL in an NBA basketball game, you can't go play pickup basketball with your buddies. It's not the same. You know, it's just not. And like we talked about it, he didn't really care, to be honest with you. And I think most people don't care that are outside the community. Just like most of you in the community had no idea how many triathletes died last year. Like you're not in that community, you don't care. You're a good person, but you still don't care. You don't know their names, you don't know their stories, you don't know what happened, and you're not going to go try to find out either. So most people on the outside of CrossFit community, they don't care about this, but there is a perception that we have fought forever that it's dangerous. And in some ways it is. I'm not going to fight against that. I lean into it. It's one of the first things you told me years ago before you were even a coach. It's like we should lean into it, not run away from it. And CrossFit by nature can be dangerous. And so can running, you know, so can flag football. But the public perception of trying to get CrossFit, the brand, to 20 to 30 million people, Don Fall's goal that he talked about on this table over a year ago, you're not going to get there when this is the only stories you see about CrossFit is when someone dies. And that's where I think CrossFit, from a PR perspective, from a media perspective, they don't do a good job. They don't put out the good messaging out there. They don't, get good commercials on TV or showing how, weight loss and people coming off of medication and people overcoming mental health issues because of community. That's the stuff that you never see publicly. You only see it within our circle.
What would you do if you were Don Fall right now, right at this very second? Would you fire Castro or would you keep him?
Am I gonna be canceled? I would keep Castro, unless this investigation proved that he cut corners on some sort of safety protocols. Like, one of our members said, like, "Oh, I heard a rumor that the lifeguards weren't lifeguards; they were just people that were on staff standing on paddle boards." I'm like, okay, this is where you got to be careful, and you really have to verify that information before you put that out there. But if there are things like that where these weren't lifeguards or they weren't trained or they didn't have meetings, but I mean, Sean Woodland and those guys, they took someone on their podcast and that used to be on the CrossFit medical staff. Like, the training for that stuff is pretty rigorous. Like, it's a very sophisticated program. And that guy, I think he headed up the medical team at CrossFit. He said that they made a lot of requests to Dave and his team for financial, they had, go through a process to get investment into the safety protocols, and they never said no to anything. And when I hear stuff like that, I really don't think that you can pin this on Castro from my outsider perspective. So because of that, I think firing him is the easy thing to do, just like I think canceling the games would have been the easy thing to do. But there's a huge amount of repercussions that could come from that. And I don't think it's necessary to put him on the cross as the sacrificial lamb of this whole situation. I think if I was Don Fall, I would be communicating a lot more, and that's always been their downfall. I still don't get it. Maybe it's above my pay grade. I'm just a level 2 CrossFit coach that has a bachelor's degree. I'm not a big white collar, smart, intelligent guy. But I think that when you communicate things, you're not trying to change anyone's mind, but you're also not coming across as you're trying to hide something. Like, if I'm Don Fall, I'm hopping on a town hall Zoom call where you can ask questions with affiliate owners, members of the community, with athletes weekly. And to give it a sounding board and let people just talk this out, because I really do think that the more you talk this out with people and you go in with an open mind, you will be able to understand the perspective of someone else. But if you hide, you don't talk, you leave keyboard warriors to put all the information out there, you've lost control of the message.
I think...
what would you do? Downfall?
Yeah. So at first...
After you create the app.
Yeah,
CrossFit app.
That's right. At first, I was of the mindset that they had to get rid of Dave Castro. That was my initial
emotional response.
Yes, you take the hit, you're the responsible one, you take the hit, you take the fall. But now, actually also listening to you, I think there are a couple things. The first thing is I think loyalty is important. Okay? There's no doubt, and I would say the first thing is for whatever issues Dave Castro has, there's no doubt he has been completely committed to CrossFit in every way possible.
As much as any human on the earth.
As much as anyone else. And so as a person who is loyal to the people that you work with, you cannot throw anyone under the bus. Now, if I'm the CEO and I know I have shareholders or whatever, PE, like a private equity firm, that they might kill me for it and I might have to take the fall. Sorry, I keep saying fall, Don Fall.
Right, yeah.
But, I mean...
I know what you're saying.
But so be it. I think if I'm a principled person and I know that this person has worked for CrossFit for, 17, 18, whatever, 20 years, I'm keeping him.
Yeah.
Now, I understand what the fallout...
There will be negative feedback.
Major. It could kill CrossFit. I don't care. I'm keeping the people that... Now, but there are a couple things involved. One is... When I listened to Sean Woodland and Tommy Marquez, and they talked about it, they used to work for CrossFit.
Yep.
And they were so careful about talking about this.
They're very careful guys.
Right. But you have to listen to what they don't say in order to figure out what they're thinking. And what they're not saying is, no, Dave Castro isn't a dictator. They're not saying that. They had the same issues that the PFAA had when they were working on media team. No response, no feedback, dictatorial decisions that were made.
Just don't get it.
And so, crappy PR. And so Dave Castro I would talk to Dave if I was Don Fall, and I'd say, listen, you have to change. Because I don't care what your meaning is or your intent. There are a crap load of people out here that really feel you are not engaging them. You have changed to a certain degree, but you haven't changed enough.
Okay, so that's the line. Because he has changed, but he hasn't changed enough.
Right. That's what you said, right? That's exactly what you said. So if Castro is willing to actually take people's input, actually realize the way I'm doing things has to change more, and then present that to others, like, listen, we haven't done exactly the right thing, but we're going to continue to do the right thing, then I would keep him in a heartbeat. I'd work with the PFAA, say, listen, here's Castro, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to take things into consideration. Mm-hmm. I'm not firing him, but listen, he's not going to be the same Dave Castro in the sense of like whatever issues you've had with him, he's going to address with you.
Right.
But we're not compromising in terms of who we work with, who is our personnel. He can't fire Dave Castro. I just realized that right now. Mm-hmm. If he fires him, CrossFit is dead. It's dead. Mm-hmm. He has to keep him, and he has to change what's within the circle.
There will be a major civil war within the CrossFit community if he gets fired.
You cannot.
Like that the Syvertsen crew who, love him or hate him, he's already said, I listened to what he put out there. This is, I forget what day, it might have been Monday or Tuesday. And it was, it was a little aggressive, coming down on the athletes, but he admits it in there. He's like Dave Castro's unofficial brother. Like they're so close. And he's loyal to maybe even a fault. Like, I don't even know if he has that much credibility on this subject because of how biased he is towards Dave. Mm-hmm. However, there is a huge group of savant-type people in CrossFit space that I've always said this. There is old school and new school in CrossFit. There mm-hmm. is. I don't care what anyone says. Mm-hmm. Most of those old schoolers will revolt to the point where they would probably leave the community. The open numbers will plummet. If the open numbers plummet, you start to lose a part of the games. I don't think it'd be right away, but I do think you start to lose part of it. And Syvertsen does say a lot of positive things. I like some of his ideas, to be honest with you.
I can't stand him. He's a total a-hole in my mind.
He is an asshole.
I cannot stand even the way he should be out of CrossFit. I cannot stand the MFer, but I respect that he does bring a significant.
I would say he has credibility, but he has credibility, but doesn't mean he uses it correctly.
Yeah,
like
when you're talking about hey, Danielle Brandon, are your boobs real?
Yeah.
Okay, get the F out of here, okay?
And that's his sense of humor. Some people love it.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. I cannot stand him, and I won't give him any credibility, but I do acknowledge the power and the popularity that he has within the sport.
But this is where, to play devil's advocate to the direction we're going, you can't fire Dave Castro. I will go on record saying I don't think he should be. However, if you don't, the negative repercussions of that can be, does he start to feel invincible? Like, man, they're not going to fire me. Someone died?
No.
Like,
No.
Do you think he'll actually change?
This is the CEO. You say, look at everything here.
Yeah.
Look at the state of CrossFit. Look at the discussion that's going on. Dave, what are you going to do about this?
Yeah.
This
absolutely.
is you.
Yes.
This is you.
Yeah.
And if Dave, and I believe he does feel responsible for the games, they're his baby.
Yep.
He's going to say, give me the chance to fix this.
Yeah.
And I will.
I hope so.
Because if he, listen, I don't know if Dave has the wherewithal to be able to do so.
And say it publicly, too. I think it's so important
to
be
really humble.
Yes.
Humble.
Humility.
That's the one thing CrossFit has lacked that we have always espoused. Yep. They have been in service to the affiliates, to others, but they have never been humble.
Yep.
Ever.
Yeah, you can be in service and lack humility. And I think that's where I would say over the 10 years of being an affiliate owner, that is the theme, the old school theme that still kind of resides in that circle.
So if he takes responsibility and says, all right, I need to fix this, I think he can do it. I think if you're Don Fall, if you only care about private equity, you fire him. If you are actually a real person who cares about CrossFit and you're willing to take the risk that you go down with the ship and that CrossFit dies, you got to keep him. And if it was me, I'm going to keep him.
What about this option? Donfall gets rid of the games. It loses money. According to them, they did significant budget cuts, not the greatest year for that to be out there, but they did significant budget cuts this year for the games. Donfall's on record saying that. Part of the reason why I think they moved to Fort Worth, but again, don't quote me on that. I know some of the financial inner workings of the Masters games and the Teens games and the adaptive games. Like they definitely are getting rid of a lot of dead weight / costs that are weighing the company down. If Donfall looks at this from private equity and says, hey, this is negative PR. We understand it's a celebration of CrossFit, the CrossFit Games, and it does have enough momentum now. Could it hurt the brand? I don't know. You would actually talk to a bunch of Tim Carrolls and say, like, hey, I actually think for the long-term future, 10, 20 years from now, maybe not next year, CrossFit without the games associated with them might actually be a better product for it from a fitness regimen. I don't want that. I love the games. But Donfall, this could be an opportunity for him to say, hey, the games are done. And let someone else take it over. Someone will take it over.
Right. I think you mean just like the Legends took over for
yeah. I mean,
the Masters.
It's called the CrossFit Games by Legends, but like Rogue can take it over or someone takes it over. Some of these guys, there's enough money in the space where
I can see Rogue doing that. I would say this.
The games.
You can't get rid of it completely, right? Because I think if you did the analysis, the PR value still outweighs the cost that
and
you're
the
putting.
open.
Yes, and all that. It's too inextricably linked. And to get rid of that, you would basically, everyone would be up in arms about that.
Yeah.
But I think you have to think about how you can leverage it. Like you said, do you farm it out? Do you start morphing it into more like High Rocks type events where you're kind of having multiple events for greater participation out there? Like, I don't know. This could, they always say, like, you have opportunity in when bad things happen.
Right.
And so you're right. This is, I wouldn't say get rid of it, but you're right in the sense you should self-reflect and be like, what can we do with the games to change it, to make it...
This would be the time to change the
make it better. Right. So do we push it into big super regional events like High Rocks, more money-making? Do we farm it out to somebody?
Savon's idea, not that we want to talk about him, but
I don't mind Savon.
his opinions.
His opinions, yeah. I mean, I just don't like him as a person.
He said that the games should be more of just a celebration for affiliate owners to come together. And yes, we'll watch the games, but the prize money is not what it was. And he has this whole idea. It's a 10-minute YouTube video if anyone wants to watch it. I think they took it off in a longer episode and they just made it. And he talks about how it should just be a celebration of the community coming together. Let's get rid of the athletes and all their egos and all the prize money. Let's put the money back into the community instead of, the athletes' pockets who are turning on the community every opportunity they get. And I do agree with that. Daniel Brandon telling everyone they shouldn't sign up for the Open because we did dumbbell snatch week 1 and deadlift week 2. That was literally the reason why, which is absolutely ridiculous. And there are a lot of games athletes that are disconnected. They used to work out from affiliates. They used to come from the affiliates. They used to do the open workouts at affiliates. Now they just have their own training camps, and then most of them are not a part of the affiliates anymore. And it really has fractured the community where we used to be in this together. At Hoboken, I was with the regional athletes in the 5 a.m. class on a Tuesday that missed the games by 3 spots. Like, he was doing the same workouts as us. I know it's a different, more sophisticated program now, but we're fractured. And his idea was to make the games no longer, hey, the elite athletes and all the prize money and all the sponsors, affiliate owners, this is where we meet every year, a festival kind of thing. And, that's where...
Well, isn't that what Wadapalooza sort of is right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think Wadapalooza and Rogue do a lot of things right.
Yeah.
That the games could learn from. And when I hear Dave Castro say that he never looks and watches and looks at the workouts, that does feed into the idea that he's very stubborn. And maybe those are some things that he needs to change, where he needs to get some other people in the room.
There are a lot of people who go to Wadapalooza to compete, and they find great joy in it. I just saw Steve O'Day. He was really, and some of the other big comps, like I think Asbury Park did really big this year. I like the idea of making it more inclusive for affiliates. I would want to see how the revenue plays and how everything else moves around it. But I don't want to get rid of watching these elite athletes compete.
Same.
It's aspirational, and it's like watching NFL players. Like they're friggin' amazing people.
Yeah.
When you watch these people do amazing athletic feats, it's so entertaining.
Oh, I agree. It connects us. It really does. We could do a better job, and I think the games athletes could do a better job of letting this connect to the community. But it is cool to know that Tia, her season started off doing the same workout we did, 24.1, 24.2, 24.3, did the quarterfinals. We all did the same workouts, and like different level, different, but that doesn't matter. It's still the same. And again, that's the togetherness I'm talking about that I think they would benefit
We
from.
saw Roman Krenikov and Pat Vellner compete right here.
Yeah, 20 feet from us.
How much more of a connection can you get between an affiliate and these elite athletes?
Yep.
So I think it can be done. I do like some of these ideas, but the execution is complicated, and it's now more complicated. Well, maybe because there's going to be some flux because of all of these issues, maybe they can find a way of pulling that stuff out in a better way.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, let's ask ourselves, who has the biggest opportunity for impact from here on out? Because this is still, even though it's weeks away and most of us are kind of moved on to the other topics in our lives that we put our mind to. No, not that we're disrespecting Lazar and his family, but like any tragedy, you do move on, and it's not wrong, and you do remember at the same time. But there's still something that needs to be done, and we will get something from CrossFit at some point. Who has the biggest most impactful voice here? Is it, I'll give you some options, games athletes, affiliate owners, Don Fall, Dave Castro? Which of those people have the biggest opportunity to impact positively to get this thing better than it ever has been? Because I still don't think CrossFit is at its peak. I still don't think the CrossFit Games are at their peak.
You start.
Dave Castro, but he needs to change a few things. Again, don't have a personal relationship with him, so I don't know all the ins and outs of his life, but I do think that there needs to be a little bit more of a professional voice. I love his weekly recaps. I think he does a good job there, but I still think there's a little bit of improvement needed on them. Not necessarily just from a public speaking perspective, but to try to be a little bit more open-minded instead of saying whenever someone gives him a complaint about something, it's like, oh yeah, we'll talk about it. Like, circle back on every single thing you're going to say that you talk about. That's one of my least favorite things about listening to debates, whether they're political or even sport. It's like, oh, we'll get back to you on that. We'll get back, and then you don't hear them say, it's an easy cop-out. I want to hear him really address some of the issues and be humble about it. And understand, and him tell us he doesn't have the answers. He doesn't know. So remember the episode we did on humility. The more you hear someone say, I don't know, and I'm sorry, those two things, that's when you know that person's humble or not. If you never hear someone say, yeah, I just don't know the facts, don't know the story, or, hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong, they need an uptick in humility, and that's something I wish we could hear from Castro more. Is I'm sorry and I don't know, but I'm working on it, and this is what I'm going to do to show you I'm working on it. I actually think the second most influential part to this are the affiliate owners. I think they're much more important than the games athletes. No offense to the games athletes, but you guys will be gone in 3 years. We'll still be here. Your career is going to end at some point. Ours won't. Our affiliate's still going to be open, and I think affiliate owners need to look at this situation, and whether you agree with what happened or not, whether you want to point the finger or not, I do think an affiliate owner will set the tone for the CrossFit community, the big group of communities, right? Not just the games community, of how we respond to any sort of adversity. We're not done with adversity. We're going to hit more. The CrossFits and gyms, our gym, we hit adversity weekly, monthly, yearly. How we respond to it should always be measured, should always be magnified. You should act like you don't get a second chance. You get one shot to respond to something, and I think every single time something comes up, when you find out if Castro is going to be involved or not, what's your response, and how much impact can that response have on the future of CrossFit? No, not just today, the long-term future. So those are the two most influential voices. I don't give a about games athletes and the amount of followers, the amount of likes that they get. That stuff it lacks substance to me, especially some of these athletes that are not a part of affiliates. They just don't get it. And so that's why I don't really care. No offense to those guys. I don't really care what they say about this in the long-term future.
I agree with you about Dave Castro. I don't know. He has one of the biggest challenges ahead for him in his career. And how he responds to what has happened is going to determine his legacy in terms of CrossFit and the CrossFit Games. And whether he pivots with more humility, whether he goes down the way he always has, I don't know. But this is a huge challenge for him, and I hope he steps up. And similarly, same with Don Fall. He has been a leader for only a very short period of time, and how he allows Dave Castro to respond, how he takes this leadership challenge. Again, probably a huge opportunity in terms of changing things when you have a tragedy like this. I am so sorry for Lazar Djukic's family and what they've gone through. It's terrible. And I don't think we're ever going to forget that. But in addition to that, it would be meaningful on one level if they took this terrible incident and said, what is it that we're going to do to make things better in terms of our organization? Lazar Djukic, you know, it's so heartbreaking when his brother said he loved the sport that didn't love him back. But the thing is he loved CrossFit. His brother says he loved CrossFit. So maybe CrossFit can love him back. Maybe CrossFit can do something that validates Djukic's love for CrossFit. Maybe we can do something about it. And you're right, as affiliate owners, it is our responsibility not to be like, well, whatever, but to be engaged, because they can have that will make a huge difference. You're right. I don't think the athletes they're not like mayflies where they're just going to like die next week, but I will, go away next week. But I will say this, I respect their opinions because they're closer to everything, the situation, than any of us are. Yep. And I will listen to them. But you're right. At the end of the day, they don't have as much power as they might think they have. Right. They're not going to be able to change the sport as much as they think. It's like the, I don't know, NFL Players Association.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
Like they're going to make they have some say, but not as much as they might think they want or have.
And those guys are crying all the time. They are. Underpaid.
I mean,
millions of dollars.
Listen, people's lives are on the line here, and I understand that. So I will never diminish that fact that one of theirs passed. And if CrossFit is found responsible, then they need to step up and address that in the biggest way. I don't know. Like I am now going from grieving and emotional despair to what is it that we can do to make things better. Yeah. This should never be something that we should forget about. And I love CrossFit, and I hope CrossFit loves me back too. Mm-hmm. And I want them to do the right thing here. And I don't know exactly what that right thing is, but I know right now so far I haven't felt like it's exactly the right thing.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to end it, is that we love CrossFit. There's a lot of people that like CrossFit, but I do think there's a growing list of people that don't feel CrossFit loves them back. Are they grateful for us as a community? Are they grateful for us as affiliate owners? Are they grateful for us as fans of the sport? And maybe that needs to be, when they get past this investigation, that might need to be their plans. How do we show love back to the community and show them that we truly do care? And we talk about that as affiliate owners all the time. What can we do to show, whether it's parties, events, conversations, and that's something that's 24/7, 365 as a staff and as an ownership, is what can you do to show them that you truly do appreciate them and love them? So thank you guys for listening. We will probably not be on next week because Sam and I are heading out, with a few other people are heading out to Birmingham for the games, for the Masters games. So because of that, I don't think we're going to have anything lined up for next Monday, but we will have Tracy on after the games athlete from Bison, and reflect on our experience there. Really looking forward to supporting Bob, Joe, and the Legend staff. But yeah, if you guys have any comments, you can put them in our comments. You can message us. We always like feedback. This is a tough situation to really talk about. And I can promise you from my perspective, I won't judge, good or bad, anyone's opinion on what we talked about and what your stance is on the subject. I do think it's important to have more conversations about it. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Herd Fit podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.